Chicagoans in some of our most underserved communities. First, I want to share that the City Council passed a series of measures that will create economic opportunities and develop community spaces for our most underserved neighborhoods. These measures include supporting the development of affordable housing projects led by the Latin United Community Housing Association, or LUCA, in Alderman Maldonado's ward, and he spoke to that today. The development of Chicago's first Huddle House restaurant in Calumet Heights, and that's in Alderman Harris's ward, which leverages $1.1 million in a grant from our Neighborhood Opportunity Fund and will create 80 permanent and 50 construction jobs for local residents, and that development is well underway. An expansion of El Paseo Community Garden in Pilsen by nearly a half acre, giving residents more cultivation and community programming space. And the second highlight I want to share was the City Council's approval of Matt Baudet as our new Department of Buildings Commissioner. Commissioner Baudet not only brings decades of experience and leadership into this role to ensure our city's buildings, homes, and workplaces remain some of the safest in the nation, he will also be Chicago's first ever Native American to serve as a city commissioner. And I'm very, very proud of that fact, in addition to the level of expertise that he brings to the job. I'm excited to welcome Commissioner Baudet to our team, and we all look forward to working alongside him and First Deputy Marlene Hopkins to continue improving the quality of our city's buildings and homes. In addition to these measures, I also want to briefly touch on some of the measures we introduced today, which will further our ongoing efforts to create accessible employment and housing opportunities for our residents. These include a $2.5 million Neighborhood Opportunity Fund grant to the North Lawndale Employment Network, a community-based organization that provides training, coaching, and support services to the formerly incarcerated and others with significant barriers to employment. These funds will support the rehab of 48,000 square foot commercial building to house an LEM, offices and training, an apiary, and production area for its Sweet Beginnings Company, a cafe, and a Wintrust Bank branch drive-through service. Once completed, this project would create 13 new jobs and retain 41 jobs, directly enhancing the economic vibrancy of our North Lawndale community on our city's west side. Next, we introduced a measure to support the development of Chicago Lighthouse residences in the near West Side community, which will be the first affordable housing project of its kind in the country for people that are blind or otherwise visually impaired. And we also introduced a measure to support affordable housing in the Humboldt Park neighborhood through our City Lots for Working Families program. This program was first passed by the City Council in 2017 and provides vacant city-owned lots to developers of affordable single-family homes and 2 flats for $1 each. And now, with this specific measure, will allow developers to sell 11 affordable homes in the Humboldt Park neighborhood, giving more residents the opportunity to become homeowners. By providing resources and housing opportunities to residents that need them most, these measures will make our city more equitable and accessible for residents with special needs and lower incomes. Last, I'd like to close by reiterating the significance of the resolutions that were passed during today's City Council session. Those resolutions reflect the lives and legacy of 3 incredible powerhouses: Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I was grateful that her family, her 2 children, were able to join us today. Illinois Governor Jim Thompson, also known as Big Jim, and I was grateful that his wife Jane and daughter Samantha were able to join us, as well as family members. And not last but not least, Reverend Dr. Leon D. Fenney Jr. and his daughter and family and grandchildren were on with us today. Justice Ginsburg represented the finest among lawyers in our country and was a champion for women's rights, civil rights, and the respect of the rule of law. And while I only met Justice Ginsburg one time, I feel like my career and the opportunity to be a lawyer in a large law firm and to be able to experience the things that I did over the course of my legal career were in no small measure to the work of Justice Ginsburg in fighting for women's rights, not only over control of our bodies, but to have access to good paying jobs in the workforce. We owe Justice Ginsburg a significant debt of thanks and gratitude. Governor Thompson was a lifelong public servant and a son of Chicago, and Illinois' longest-serving governor, who proved that elected officials, regardless of what party they belong to, have a responsibility to fight for social and economic equality for all. As I mentioned during my remarks today, I first met the towering figure of Jim Thompson back in the middle 80s when I was a very young clerk working on Capitol Hill. He was the vice chair of the Martin Luther King Jr. Federal Holiday Commission and served ably. And I came to admire him over the course of that work. And of course, Reverend Dr. Finney was a longtime leader and advocate for our city whose passions for justice was felt by all and whose activism continues to inspire so many people, as you heard today from the floor of the City Council. All three of these individuals left a lasting impact on communities both in Chicago and across the country, and we must work to embody the values of leadership and justice they carried. The body also passed a resolution in honor of former CPD Chief Fred Waller, also a son of the city, for his distinguished record of 34 years of service to our community through the Chicago Police Department, working his way through the ranks of our police department, holding a number of senior supervisory roles, and leaving as the chief of the former patrol division, now known as the operations division. As you heard, many people's lives were touched by Chief Waller. He did his job. He worked hard. He did it with dignity and grace and respect, and reached out and worked collaboratively across a swath of people in every neighborhood in the city, and he will be greatly missed on the occasion of his retirement. We also passed a resolution commemorating National Hispanic We also passed a resolution commemorating National Hispanic Heritage Month, which begins in September and ends in October, and we will be hosting an official event to mark this month later on before the conclusion of that time period. And the final resolution we passed today recognizes October as National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I want to thank Alderman Stephanie Coleman for her leadership in bringing this resolution to the floor. It's critically important, as you heard members say. We have members who are both survivors and who themselves have also been touched through their family and friends by the horrible disease of breast cancer. Now, while I'm thrilled to introduce and pass a number of important measures today, I recognize that there is much work to do. And as I mentioned in my last remarks to the body, the next time I come before the City Council, it will be to propose solutions to close a $1.2 billion budget deficit for 2021 and formally introduce our proposed budget to the City Council for their consideration. This is a moment that demands more than just dollars and cents. It's a moment that will require each of us to step into our truths and lead with our values of equity and inclusion. And I look forward to the continued conversation with members of the City Council once we formally introduce our proposed budget for 2021. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions. And I should acknowledge Commissioner Allison Arwady from Public Health is with me in the event that you have any COVID-related questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. We haven't heard you speak about the graduated income tax. Where do you stand on that? Is that a good idea? There's been some controversy in the last couple of days about those who feel it might be an opening to tax retirement income. There's been nearly $100 million spent on ads. Are you a for or an against?
I'm a for. I don't think that having a flat tax rate really serves anybody well. I certainly have, and I continue to follow with great interest, the back and forth, but I am firmly in support of a graduated income tax. It doesn't make sense to me, and it really never has in my entirety of living in the state, that people who make modest income pay the same rate as people who make more, and I've been fortunate enough in my life to make a substantial amount over time. And I think people recognize the need for everyone to pay their fair share, but I think we have to do it in an equitable way, and I think that's what the fair tax, as it's known, seeks to accomplish.
Have you had any updates on the COVID relief bill? Is that going to make a difference as you prepare for your budget? And do you envision something happening that would give Chicago some relief?
Are you talking about the negotiations in Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's not going to happen in time for us to be able to provide a budget, a balanced budget to the City Council. It's unfortunate. I think there were many opportunities to get this done, but I think with the president's, now he issued a series of tweets yesterday, but with the president's tweet midday saying stop negotiating, I don't believe that it's going to happen. I hope that I'm wrong about that, because cities and towns, not just in Chicago, but really all across this country, that have been dramatically impacted by COVID-19's economic consequences, blue states, red states, purple states. This is a bipartisan issue because it's had bipartisan impact. I think that if the Congress adjourns for the election recess without sending a bill to provide relief to cities, to small businesses, to restaurants, to entertainment venues, to airports, airlines, the list is long. If that doesn't happen, not only will it be a missed opportunity, but I think, candidly, it'll be turning their back on people at a time when we are all desperately in need of additional resources. I hope that doesn't happen, but my optimism for a deal getting done really has grown to the single digits.
From Bill Cameron, at this point, how do you like your chances of avoiding a property tax increase?
Well, I'm not going to speculate about what the various tools are that we're going to have to use to close our budget deficit. But as I've said repeatedly, in this dire circumstance where there are nothing but painful choices, everything has to be on the table.
From Fran Spielman, how will the arbitrator's ruling impact your plans to return CPS to in-classroom learning?
I don't anticipate it affecting that at all. I'm loath to comment further. There's pending litigation, so I think all substantive questions need to be referred to CPS.
Do you envision school happening in November?
When we have finalized our decision on that, you'll be the first to know.
Well, I think everybody would be at this, probably at the same time, but are you working towards that?
We're always working towards that. I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that children learn best, particularly our youngest of children, with in-person instruction. Again, I will defer to CPS, but we've never stopped looking towards the future and what the possibilities would be, and we continue to follow the public health guidance, and I believe that CPS will have an announcement on that issue relatively soon.
This week?
I said relatively soon.
Alex Nitkin from the Daily Line. What do you make of the failure of your proposed industrial air quality ordinance in the City Council? And what do you say to the multiple aldermen who yesterday called it a power grab that would concentrate too much power in your administration?
Well, first of all, it's not a failure. We plan to absolutely move forward with it. I'm confident that we will get it passed. There's a lot of things that's been said about it, and I won't go into a lot of detail because I believe that the continued engagement that we are going to do over these next couple of weeks will ensure its passage. But the two, I think, streams of argument that just are completely specious, and that's lawyers speak for nonsense. Number one, that it's a power grab. Right now, and just ask Alderman Cardenas, if there is an approved plan development in an area and the current tenant leaves, a new tenant can go in with virtually any use by right and not have to seek approval of anyone, not the local alderman and certainly not the mayor. The matte asphalt plant that essentially crept up overnight in the McKinley Park neighborhood, where those residents had no say, no notice over that plant that is polluting and causing harm to that neighborhood. We have to change that around. So this isn't about aldermanic prerogative or power. It is about making sure that residents are protected and that they have fair notice when somebody is coming into their neighborhood who potentially could endanger their health through air quality issues. We have to give residents a fighting chance and the ability to impact the kind of things that are going into their neighborhoods. And under the current rules right now, that doesn't happen. The other thing is, I've heard a lot of conversation over the last couple of days with kind of the sky is falling rhetoric from certain developers. I want people to be clear about this. We spent 4 months of extensive engagement, talked to a range of different developers, and some of the specious things that are being said, that there will never be any more development in the city, obviously untrue. That people won't be able to build on spec, obviously untrue. What we are trying to accomplish is making sure, as I said, that there is notice, there's an opportunity for the local aldermen and the city to weigh in, and not just have these planned developments approved in the technical term as of right, and so that whoever is the owner of that development can put any kind of use in there that they want, and there's no oversight from the city. Of course that doesn't make sense. And what we're trying to accomplish is the same level of oversight that happens with gas stations. They haven't gone out of business. They haven't stopped opening up in the city of Chicago. So we'll separate truth from fiction. But this notion of, oh my goodness, the sky is falling, we will never have development again in the city of Chicago, I think really is insulting to the intelligence of us all.
From Craig Delamore, how will the city deal with the high overtime costs for the police department, which has already exceeded its budget, and streets and sand?
Well, look, the reality is if you look at where we were in May, through May, we were actually on target with the overtime budget that we had set for all of the city agencies, particularly police and the infrastructure departments. But look what happened. May, June, July, August, we had a lot of massive civic uprising and protests all over the city that have continued to this day. So our choice was tell the police, no, you can't go out, and you can't make sure that we're keeping First Amendment protesters safe. You can't respond to the violence that has crept up in neighborhoods. Or we gave them the ability to do their jobs and keep neighborhoods and residents safe. It was an easy call, painful call, costly call. But given the circumstances on the ground, that I think no one anticipated following the murder of George Floyd, we had to do the right thing, which is to make sure that we protected residents, businesses, property, and made sure that we did it in a way that kept our police department healthy and safe.
This one might be for Dr. Arwady as well as you. This is from Kelly Bauer from the Block Club. Why is the health department routinely failing to inform the public about RMH's applications for permits as RMH works to set up shop in East Side?
I think you mean RMG, and I don't believe that that's a fair statement of failing. There was a miss this week, which the department has addressed, but I don't think it's fair to say, because it's not true, that repeatedly failing. That's not accurate.
Dr. Arwady, would you like to weigh in as
respond?
well?
So earlier this year, the Chicago Department of Public Health actually reformed entirely its large recycling rules. And RMG is an operation. It'll actually be the first set of permits that will be issued under the large recycling permit. And so we had made clear earlier this year that we would make public anytime a permit was applied for, specifically around the recycling permit, that we would make sure that the public had the opportunity for comment, would be transparent around it. Earlier this month, a different permit was issued by the health department, not the one that is the new framing, not the one that has all of the new restrictions in place, not the one that allows operations to begin. But nevertheless, I think that we want to be completely transparent on this process. I directed the department to, even though this was not the permit that we had previously spoken about, to make sure that that is also publicly available. We're working to make sure all permits are publicly available. We have not yet received an application for the permit that is the one of significant interest, and we'll make that available as soon as we receive an application.
May I ask you as well about what's going on in Wisconsin? They've opened up a field hospital. Their COVID numbers really spiking. What is the lesson, or what are you watching? What can you weigh in on Wisconsin?
Yeah, I'm really worried about Wisconsin. You know, they've been on our travel advisory and quarantine list for a number of weeks at this point, and the increases that we have seen there far outweigh what we saw here in Illinois at the worst of our peak back in May. It's not shown signs at this point of coming down or even flattening. Their rates are nearly 3 times the case rate that we require quarantine when people are traveling. And not surprisingly, we have seen major increases in hospitalizations, major increases in deaths. And I am also starting to now see that, you know, the governor has put forward some additional restrictions in terms of starting to limit indoor gatherings, et cetera. But we've heard from many folks who, you know, move back and forth between Illinois and Wisconsin for work, for example, that people broadly are not wearing masks as much as they are here in the Chicago area. And we know that a lot of the restrictions that, frankly, we would have put in place a long time ago here, if we had seen the kinds of increases that they have seen in hospitalizations and deaths. I'm glad that they're starting to make those movements. But I'm worried. Wisconsin is right next door. Indiana, as you heard yesterday, is also, you know, there's a good chance they may end up on the quarantine list next week. And I would encourage all of the states, you know, in the whole country to follow the guidance. And if we start to see major increases in case rates, especially starting to impact hospitalizations or deaths, that we act to bring the outbreak under control. We know how to do it. Wisconsin knows how to do it. And I think they're taking steps toward that. But reminder to everybody here in Chicago, if you can avoid travel to Wisconsin, please do not travel. And if you have to go, you need to quarantine when you return.
Can anyone for two? One from Adi Quigg here. Sorry. Okay, Adi Quigg is asking the mayor.
Mary Ann, before you move on, I'd like to weigh in on the last question, if I may. Wisconsin is what happens when you politicize public health. The governor rightfully put in place a number of different measures that were designed to keep us safe. A highly politicized move by the Republican members of that General Assembly took the case up to a Republican-stacked Supreme Court that struck down everything that the governor is trying to do to keep that state safe. And what have we seen? Chaos. The fact that in October that a state is now having to open up a field hospital because of the stress on the healthcare system, because of the explosion in cases requiring hospitalization, is a disgrace. And it is solely ties back to the actions of a partisan state legislature and a partisan Supreme Court. Public health should never be politicized. In a time of crisis, as we are right now, in a global pandemic, the fact that those partisans put their party over public health is shameful, and voters in Wisconsin should take note of that. This is not something that ever should be politicized, and not only are the residents of Wisconsin suffering as a consequence of blind allegiance to partisanship, it affects the entire region. I have beloved family members who live in Wisconsin, and I'm worried for them every single day. I'm worried for the people who have to go out and work every single day, as I would people here in Chicago. But without the tools that a elected official who has a responsibility to the people, having stripped the governor essentially of all those tools and limited tools on the part of county public departments of public health, city departments of public health, mayors, and county executives, I fear for the safety of Wisconsin.
I so want to ask a follow-up. Do you envision some kind of, at the border of the Illinois-Wisconsin border, saying to people, show us why you're coming here?
Look, we've never taken that kind of an extreme measure, and I hope that we don't get to that point. But obviously, we're following the developments in Wisconsin, as we have been now for months, very, very closely.
All right, now from A.D. Quigg at Cranes, what impact do Fred Waller, Susan Lee, Barbara West all have on leaving at about the same time? What does that have on reform and public safety efforts? Does CPD leadership have a deep enough bench to make for all those exits at the same time?
Yeah, Fred Waller is obviously beloved and absolutely will be missed. But the point, the mark of a strong organization is to have a succession plan. Chief Brian McDermott has not missed a beat. He has been working hand in glove now for months, and there was a transition period between him and Chief Waller. So I think the CPD is in good hands. We wish Deputy Superintendent Barbara West the best, but there again, reform doesn't depend on a single individual. We built and continue to build an infrastructure to support the reform effort going forward now and in the years ahead. So I don't expect us to miss a beat. Same with Deputy Mayor for Public Safety Susan Lee. Susan let me know back in the summer that for a variety of reasons she felt like a transition was appropriate. She stayed to make sure that the things that we wanted to get accomplished on her watch, we've done. I think the hallmark of that is the comprehensive plan for preventing violence and fostering safety that was released last week. Really, that is a mission of love on the part of Susan Lee, and we all are going to be the better for the work that she has done. No one's irreplaceable, and so in city government, we've got to make sure that we have an infrastructure built to move forward, and that's what we've done, and I'm not concerned about any of those departures. Life happens. People leave, and we go on.
From Amy Jacobson, besides vying for 4-hour work days, the CTU now wants 4-day work weeks. What's your response?
I'm not going to respond to anything related to the CTU's efforts. Those are being dealt with by CPS, and those questions should go to CPS. I feel very, very comfortable with how Dr. Jackson and her leadership team are handling this unprecedented challenge of making sure that our children have the opportunity to continue learning in the midst of a global pandemic. I feel like I'm conferring with them on a regular basis about a range of different matters, and I have great confidence in their thoughtfulness, the level of engagement that they have with people in the entire school community. And we're going to, as you heard when we announced that we were going to remote learning and what the standards were going to be in place around accountability, making sure that there's attendance taken, that there's grades being given out, and that there's accountability for everybody who is responsible for making sure that our children learn. We have not wavered in that commitment, nor will we.
Will you be watching tonight's debate?
Of course I will.
What are you looking for? Perhaps a different style?
It's an interesting question, and obviously a lot has happened in the last 3-4 days that have to factor into the debate. I think it's going to be a challenge for Vice President Pence to defend the leadership, or some would say the lack thereof, of the president during the pandemic. If I'm Senator Harris, I spent a lot of time on that issue and that issue alone. To me, it's an epic fail. And what we've seen out of the president in the last week, since we found out that he tested positive for COVID-19, and refusal to allow case investigation, contact tracing, leaving the hospital, I think, early. Now we hear reports today he's in the Oval Office. it shows a selfishness that is not consistent with good leadership. The fact that he left the hospital to do a little tour with to soak in the adulation of people who had been gathered there to support him, putting at risk everybody involved in getting him in and out of that vehicle. I just think the mountain of evidence as to why his leadership has failed on a number of levels, but particularly when it comes to COVID-19, is something that I am confident that Senator Harris, who is herself a seasoned debater and prosecutor, will not miss an opportunity. Now, she need not overplay her hand. I think Vice President Pence is going to be decidedly on the defense, and the platitudes that he normally uses in defending the president, I think are going to ring hollow in light of the circus that we've seen over the course of the last week.
Thank you, Mayor.